Creep night, sure to send a chill down your spine. Welcome to Creep Night. In tonight's episode, we're gonna try not to stay up until midnight.
I'm here to remind you not to stay up at midnight. You may laugh and think this is some kind of joke, but I assure you that this is not. If you don't believe me, check out the Marshall case. What is the Marshall case, you may be asking yourself? Well, let me tell you, but you won't like where this story will go. So close your eyes and imagine what I'm telling you. Marshall was an 11-year-old boy who liked to stay up well past his bedtime, but never made it past 11:30. He wanted to beat his record of how long he could stay up. As you know, staying up can be a very hard thing to do. Marshall tried everything he could to stay up, but nothing seemed to work. Until one night, right before bed, he decided he would turn an alarm on to go off every 5 minutes to keep him awake. He sat there playing his video games. Even after his mother had told him to go to bed, he refused to give up on setting a new record. Maybe, just maybe, if he had listened, he would have been spared that Halloween night. But set in his ways, he decided to ignore the warning signs. The first sign came from a raven outside of the window who cooed at him in hopes of getting his attention. But Marshall ignored the bird and continued to play his games. The second warning came when a gust of wind howled outside, but Marshall paid no attention to it as he continued to play. The third was when the television began to flicker. Marshall just shut the television off and turned it right back on. I will warn you now, and again, for goodness sake, heed my warning. Do not, and I repeat, with the most sincerity in my voice, do not stay up at midnight. Now that I have warned you, yet again, we can continue the story. Marshall continued to play his games. When he glanced at the clock, it had only read 10:10 p.m. He grew frustrated with how long time was taking, but if only he knew this too was a sign for him to go to bed, then perhaps, maybe, just maybe, he would have heeded that warning. But yet again, he chose to ignore it. Marshall snuck down the kitchen to grab the trick-or-treat candy that he'd gotten the night before. He crept back up the stairs, and into his room he sat down by his television and began to eat his candy while he watched his favorite scary movie. I'll warn you again, before the midnight hour, if your eyes are still peeking, please, I beg, don't stay up at midnight, for it could be you too who share the same fate. I see you will not heed my warning, so I guess I have no choice but to continue the story. We know that when the clock struck 11 p.m., that Marshall had gone into the kitchen again. This time, he would have a nice little meal, his last meal of the night. He grabbed 2 slices of bread, some peanut butter and jelly, and made himself a sandwich. It was around this time that Marshall began to hear scratching noises that seemed to be coming from upstairs. Marshall began to walk up the stairs, where the noise became louder. He stopped at the edge of his bedroom door. He slowly pushed this door open. He had laughed at himself, thinking it was just the television. Had Marshall paid attention, he might have realized that the scratching had not come from that horror movie that he had been watching. But once again, he paid no attention and chose to ignore the warning. Marshall sat back down in front of his television and continued to watch his movie. When the clock struck 11:30, the events of this night would start to pick up as the midnight hour would soon be at hand. The wind began to blow harder, making the tree branches tap against the window. The lights in the room began to flicker off and on, but Marshall assumed it had just been the storm causing the lights to flicker off and on. So he got up and turned the lights off. When the clock finally struck midnight, Marshall's closet door began to creak open, and a shadowy figure made its way out of the closet door. The shadowy creature stepped behind Marshall.
Isn't it past your bedtime?
It had asked Marshall. Marshall felt his skin crawl when he turned to see the shadowy creature behind him. Who are you? Marshall asked.
I am the spirit of Halloween. I am darkness. I am everything that creeps at night.
The spirit of Halloween replied. Marshall continued to stare at the shadowy figure, what began to take form as what looked like the Grim Reaper. Marshall began to shake with fear. What do you want from me? Marshall asked in his shaky voice. The spirit of Halloween peered deep with its bright red eyes into Marshall's eyes and replied,
Didn't anyone warn you not to stay up at midnight?
Marshall did not answer back.
You now belong to me,
the creature said. Marshall let out a loud scream as the shadow swallowed him up into the darkness. So as I stated now 3 times, just in case this warning goes in one ear and out the other, please do not stay up at midnight, because you too might go missing on Halloween night.
I hope you all heed the warning, so the next time your parents tell you to go to bed, maybe, just maybe, you will listen.